Launch auto sequence has started.
Crew on for all.
Welcome to
Moonsnacks podcast,
the show where we record our favorite leaders and we're going to send them to the moon. But in doing so, we get to hear the 3 movies that they take with them and why they're so important to them.
Use the power of movies and story to get insights about the challenges, the possibilities,
And learn a little bit about their work, their process, and what it means to be a good leader.
It's really Moonsnacks to empower, stimulate, and motivate the brain.
Food for thought. And I'm Jessica Fox. I'm a writer, an author, and a filmmaker.
And I'm Ed Hoffman. I was a Chief Knowledge Officer for NASA and the Director of NASA's Academy and Program Project in Engineering Leadership.
We're asking of our guests something that I'm not sure I could do myself.
I always have a list of movies ready to go when I speak to you.
So right now, what would you take to the moon with you?
You know, not having to think, I would take with me Interstellar. I would take
so
with
good.
me Young Frankenstein.
It's
And I
so
would take
good.
with me Minority Report.
Oh, interesting. Didn't see that coming, but I like that movie a lot. We're so delighted to have you here. We have Bridget McNulty. Bridget is a writer. She's an author. She's co-founder of Sweet Life, which is South Africa's largest diabetes community. She does diabetes advocacy, which we're going to get into soon. And her books include Strange Nervous Laughter, then the Grief Handbook, which is phenomenal, and we'll go into that soon. And for those who like anticipating, her new book's coming out this year called Daily Glimmers and All About Joy. Bridget, I'm really glad you went from the Grief Handbook to joy. I feel like you've gotten the whole spectrum in there. We are delighted to have you for Moonsnacks. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. What a glimmer to be spending time with you both this afternoon.
For folks who can't see, clearly this is a podcast, but Bridget's standing in front of or sitting in front of the most beautiful blue wall with clouds, and every cloud has a silver lining.
Silver glitter lining.
I've known Bridget for such a long time, and Ed, I've known you for such a long time. I've been talking to you both of each other, so this is a total joy that we're going to get to spend some time with Bridget before we send her to the moon.
And how long are we there for?
You didn't read the little contractual thing that said we get you there and we keep you there. Coming back is not right now an option.
Which is why your 3 movie selection's very important.
The snack thing bothers me more, but we can get to that later.
Oh, we will get to the snack. Nutrition doesn't really exist on the moon. It's fine. Bridget, tell us about your first selection.
Oh, man. I mean, Amélie, I feel like Amélie should be everyone's favorite movie. It was a very defining movie for me. I watched it when we just started college. Jess and I went to college together at Franklin Marshall. And I think this was probably sophomore year. So you're like hunting for identity everywhere you look. And Amélie just handed me all the identity I wanted on a very beautiful red and green plate. So visually, I think it's a beautiful movie. And it's one of the few movies that I read up about the director afterwards, so Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and he apparently highlighted the red and green colors in the movie, which is why it's almost saturated. Her design and fashion choices are fabulous. And I watched it again last year, and I still think they're fabulous. They're slightly dated, but fabulous. Her hair was so beautiful. I immediately went home and chopped my hair off to try and make myself look like her. It didn't work, but I still tried. And then the actual content of the movie is so beautiful because it's about this very lonely little girl who grows up in a really isolated way. And like, if we were to look at it through a modern lens, was really quite severe mental health issues, and decides that the way she's going to bridge the gap between her and other people is through good deeds that will bring them delight. And the good deeds, some of them are so tiny, but so beautiful. So one of my favorites is she takes a blind man on a walk down the street and describes to him in very minute detail what she's seeing and all the colors, and like, smell that, this is what's in the butcher's shop at the moment. And it's such tiny little things, but it makes such a huge impact on the lives of those around her. So I mean, that just ticks all my boxes.
Venez, je vais vous aider. On descend et hop, c'est parti. Là, on croise la veuve du tambour de la fanfare. Elle porte la vareuse de son mari depuis qu'il est mort. Attention, hop. Tiens, l'enseigne de la boucherie Chevalier n'a perdu une oreille. Ce rire, c'est celui du mari de la fleuriste. Il a des petites rides de malice au coin des yeux. Oh, dans la vitrine de la pâtisserie, il y a des sucettes Pierrot Gourmand. Vous sentez ce parfum? C'est Pépone qui fait goûter ses melons aux clients.
Allez, allez, goûtez mon melon.
Ah, chez Marion, ils font de la glace au calisson. On passe devant la charcuterie, 79 le jambon à l'os, 45 le travers demi-sel. On arrive chez le fromager, 12,90 le picodon de l'Ardèche et 23,50 le cabicou du Poitou. Chez le boucher, il y a un bébé qui regarde un chien qui regarde les poulets rôtis. Voilà, maintenant on est devant le petit kiosque à journaux, juste à l'entrée du métro. Et moi je vous laisse ici. Au revoir.
And then I also love that in the middle of it, or middle to 2/3 of the way through, she has like a fatigue section where she has martyred herself too much and she's only looking after other people and she stopped looking after herself and she has this whole like breakdown, and that resonated very strongly with me in my 20s. But I think it's just a beautiful exploration of love, but it's also of identity and finding out who you are in the world and how intricately connected to other people we are. Like, I just smiled through the whole thing. So who wouldn't want to watch that on repeat?
There's a couple of things in there too that I just want to go back and highlight and see if we can dig in. The first one is this idea of connection, that she takes it upon herself actually to make the lives of other people better. Bridget, you've continually done this from the time that you were at school to when we were in college together, raising money for organizations back in South Africa, to your diabetes advocacy. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of social impact that you seem to feel innately like it's part of our responsibility as being part of a community?
Growing up in South Africa is very different. We have huge divides between haves and have-nots, which I think a lot of countries have, but we don't hide them away very well. So, which is better, I think. So, for example, I live in Hart Bay, which is a seaside town / village, but it's really a microcosm of South Africa in that there are 3 different groups of people living right on top of each other. So we have those who are privileged enough to own houses and gardens and swimming pools. We have like the super rich version of those who have horses and paddocks and that kind of thing. And then we have a large, what we call a squatter camp, which is an informal settlement, which is a lot of people who are living in like shacks or very basic houses. And then we have a large fishing village, which is people who they like go out, they're working fishermen, don't have a lot of money, and everyone is glommed together in this village that there are only 2 roads out of. You can take the road over the mountain or you can take the road over the sea. And it's so interesting and important to not be in a bubble. It's very easy in South Africa as well to live in a bubble as it is anywhere and only see people who are as privileged as you are. And I have always felt that it's really important not to do that. And when I was in high school, I was head girl, which is you're essentially like an 18-year-old who's given power. But what was amazing was that I suddenly had access to the whole school, right? And I could say to them, look, there's this underprivileged school who doesn't have stationery, and if everyone was privileged, if you all brought in like your leftover stationery, we could make such an impact to these kids. And people responded amazingly, and they brought in so much stuff that we got the local newspaper to like bring a truck around. We filled this whole truck with stationery. It was remarkable. And then I was like, oh my God, this is so easy. We can do this all the time. So then when we were at college, Jess and I decided we would dress our college better because their fashion choices were questionable. And I hope this is aligning with your impression of Jessica. There were a lot of preppy T-shirts under button-up shirts, which didn't work. So Jess and I went to Goodwill and we chose some fabulous outfits, and then we sold those. And we also got donations from all the students. And then the proceeds of that went to an AIDS orphanage that I was supporting here in South Africa. And then after I was diagnosed with diabetes, I was looking for hope. And I live a perfectly normal, happy, healthy life. But when I was diagnosed, everything they sent me home with said, you're now at greater risk of blindness, amputation, heart disease, kidney failure. And I was devastated. And nowhere in anything that I read everything I could find. And nowhere did it say, or you can live a healthy, happy life and do anything you want as long as you look after yourself. And so 2 years after I was diagnosed, my then boyfriend, now husband, and I went on, we decided we would do a round the world with diabetes trip to show that it's possible to travel with diabetes. And we went to Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Brazil, and Argentina. And it was the early days, it was like 2009, early days of like video and blogging and social media. And then when we came back after that, we decided to start Street Life as a community of healthy, empowered individuals with diabetes, but also to show that diabetes shouldn't stop you from doing anything. It's never stopped me from doing anything at all.
You know, one of the common themes, which we actually probably have never talked about before, is bravery. On this podcast, we interview a lot of leaders in their fields, which you are one of them. And I see that your unflinching look at things that would make others feel uncomfortable, like poverty, like illness, like there's a whole host of things like
Grief.
grief. You don't just look at it, you dive in and invite people to be included in what I see as almost like a radical perspective change of not positivity, but just engagement, and saying that actually you're in charge of the story you're telling about this.
And that's a very kind interpretation. Thank you. You know, those 5 stages of grief, which I don't really ascribe to, but they now say that the 6th stage is meaning making. So to me, it comes very naturally. It's not that I was diagnosed with diabetes and thought, oh, I'm going to be so brave and talk about this a lot. I was diagnosed with diabetes and I'm a writer, and I was shook. It like did not fit into my plan for life whatsoever. And I didn't want to be this like pale, sick person. And so I had to make meaning out of it. And my way of making meaning is to write and to connect with other people. And it was the same thing with grief. I was looking for something to explain it to me, to explain what I was experiencing, and I couldn't find it. And so I needed to make meaning out of it in order to survive. And I think it's interesting because the way that I make meaning is through writing, which is inherently an act that connects you with other people. But someone else might have done it through music or through... Do people find meaning through maths? My maths is not good, but I've heard that people find it very reassuring and meaning making.
Oh, yeah. So I teach a course, Navigating the Future of Work. Spent a lot of time talking about the importance of meaning in the work that's done. And we actually got into an interesting discussion where one of the students said, well, it's easy if you work at a place like NASA to find meaning, purpose, mission. But what about, if you're in a place that's really not good? And I basically said, I've known a lot of people who, from me and from others, were working in places or doing things that no one else would want. But they used, I think, the power of narrative or story to create the fact that they were enjoying, they were overcoming these kinds of things. They tell the story of, the janitor working at NASA. President Kennedy comes up and says, what do you do? And says, I'm getting people to the moon. And I had the same exact experience when I first check in with a woman who is the security guard who is, basically taking my fingerprints. This is, decades back. And she was so excited about everything. She said, I take the bus in every day. I tell people I'm working at NASA and, we got a launch that's coming up in 3. And she transformed what could have been for many people, I'm at this great place, but doing this kind of uninspired things she didn't see it that way. She was just like a moving, set of passion. And I think, the thing with the movie, I can see how I love the movies because, as Jessica knows, man, I love the colors. I love cinematography. I love the fantasy. This isn't a realistic Paris, which has many more issues, but this is something that has taken over and transformed it and touches other people. And you see it in a very different way. And when I looked at this movie, the name Amélie, it's a word meaning to work hard. And I thought that I don't know if it was deliberate, but that kind of, this is someone working hard at making life better for others. And we've all known people like that who, whatever's going on, they're making things better. That's almost, I think, part of their mission. But when you look at some of his other movies, like Delicatessen, it's wonderfully bizarre. And so it's this notion of taking things and using your mind, the mindset, to create the kind of world we want.
Absolutely. And the magical elements of Amélie are, some of the best bits. She says at one point, I was just thinking about it now, shy people, if only there was someone who could whisper the perfect comeback to them. And the greengrocers being really spiteful and saying something mean about the man who works with him. And she says, well, at least we know you're not a vegetable because even artichokes have hearts. And everyone goes, oh, and it's because someone's like whispered the perfect line to her. And it's the sense that it's not a real world, but it's a world that would be so beautiful to inhabit for a while.
Also, there's a bit of a Zen element to the film where she just talks about in the moment the things that give her pleasure. And Bridget, I know this is going to get into the subject of your new book, but there is also a parallel between this idea of taking joy in the small things and making lists Did you copy that? Like after watching the movie, did you think about your own personality in lists?
I mean, you know what's so funny is that I watch movies that I really love and have watched so many times, and I read books that I really love and have read so many times. Before I rewatch them, I think I'm so unique and creative and interesting. And I rewatch them and I'm like, oh, I just stole that wholeheartedly. Look what I did. That was just some thieving. So yeah, I took that. I swallowed that hook, line, and sinker. Like she talks about cracking the top of a creme brulee and sticking her hand into a sack full of dry beans, and I mean it's beautiful, right? It's presence and mindfulness and this idea of slices of joy, which is what I love so much. These 3-second moments that make you feel better, even if it's just for a moment.
Ed, when you were at NASA leading all these different teams and noticing the kind of culture within different teams, did you feel there's a correlation between the teams that were able to experience joy and their success?
So, I sometimes get the question in 30 seconds, tell us what leads to a great team. But what I noticed is that the teams or relationships that are noisy, that are engaging, and by noisy, I mean laughter, argument, movement, those are usually very successful. Teams that are very quiet, and I think relationships that don't talk. Usually, I would used to joke, I'm in a haunted house because people aren't saying things. And so I think this gets into that sense of energy. That's one of the things I was telling the students last week is you want to find ways of creating energy. Growth, discovery doesn't happen. It requires a lot of effort, a lot of work. It's very easy to get nervous around anyone or any situation and go quiet or go small. And the most successful relationships, people, teams, they go large in terms of their ideas, their thoughts, the energy, their power. And so, I think that gets into your question. And so I usually close by saying, basically what leads to a successful team, it's engagement, it's noise, it's conversation, it's humans connecting with each other in ways that make them comfortable. And that's the joyous part. NASA spends a lot of money on paying for audits. That often takes days, sometimes weeks. And I used to joke to leadership, I can walk in a team and in 20 minutes I can tell you, and we all can, right? Because you can sense what's going on, that comfort, the noise, the smiles, or the lack of it. It's huge.
And it's also being in a space that you feel safe to fail in, right? Or safe to experiment in without having to have the right answer. I think so much of the time that silence comes because people are waiting till they have the right answer or they've thought through the thing completely, rather than bringing the messy version that can be discussed a bit.
Joy can come from that individual. I noticed most of my life is things getting done in teams. And it's really powerful how you get that one person who can sometimes kind of spread this sense of energy and becomes a rippling effect of positivity, and also the danger of, a toxic kind of presence. You really have to be careful that doesn't take over. Certainly that's important on the trip to the moon.
Who else is in the pod with me? Is it just me? I just signed on the dotted line. Can I watch their movies too?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think we are probably building a library that anyone can share. Otherwise, it's just too mean.
And can I eat their snacks? Can we have a feast? We could all just pool our snacks, our unlimited supplies of one snack, and then we can have non-stop movie.
Bridget, what is the second movie that you'll be bringing with you?
The second movie is About Time, which is just such a beautiful movie and is so filled with heart and love and humor. It makes me laugh, makes me cry. I hardly ever cry in movies, but this is one of the few movies that I think is just beautiful for a few reasons. So it's a time travel movie, but it's not like a lame-o time travel movie. And I love that it is centered actually on the relationship between a father and son. I think we have a lot of mother-daughter movies. I think we have quite a lot of father-daughter movies, and it's really rare to see a positive father-son relationship. I have 3 brothers and I have a son, and I loved that. It's Donald Gleason, Bill Nye, and Rachel McAdams. I mean, what a winning combo. And there's this scene where the father and son they play table tennis throughout the movie, and it's right when they know they're not going to see each other again, and they look at each other and he says, "My dad," and then his dad says, "My son," and it is just like the love between the two of them is so palpable, and I think it's beautiful. And it's also a love story. And it's also like a reflection on how we spend our lives, because for those who haven't seen it, why would you not have seen it? It is so beautiful. But for those who haven't seen it, the main character, Tim, learns on his 21st birthday that he can travel back in time, but only within his own life. And once he has children, only until the birth of his last child. So he can repeat things that he's done wrong over and over and over again. And then he does that for a couple of years. And then his father gives him his parting wisdom is that you don't actually need to go back. You can live each day as if it's your one last ordinary, extraordinary day. And I just love everything about that. The music is wonderful. The music in Amélie is wonderful as well. Oh, it's glorious. It's like big family, love story, fun, funny, heartfelt. I've watched it so many times. I watched it the day my mom died, actually, because I wanted escapism. Yeah, I didn't tell you that. I wanted escapism, but I wanted safe escapism. So I wanted to visit people that I knew would take care of me on that day.
The comfort movie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's not it's not dumb comfort. It's funny, but it's not silly.
Nourishing.
I can watch it on repeat many, many times.
So not such a bad day after all.
No, it's pretty good, really. Very good day, actually, if it turns out.
Well, that's a relief. Because if it had been a very bad day, I thought I might have had to have had sex with you to make up for it. Good night.
It was a very, very bad day. It went very, very badly. I got fired from my job. And then I killed a man.
That is a very bad day.
It's terrible.
Yeah. The worst day ever. So sorry.
Richard Curtis just has that talent of creating this alchemy of feeling where it's not just one. It's like, you're right. It's kind of the sweet and sour and salty and meaningful notes. Do you remember watching that film?
A while ago, and I enjoyed it. I honestly didn't love it.
A lot of people don't love it. And I'm like, but are we watching the same movie?
I will watch that one again just to see, because I like the performers. And I love, the director's work. I guess we can share one of the recent movies we heard about was Love Actually.
Love Actually bothers me, though, because of the one woman. The one narrative is so sad. The one with the brother, and she's finally with her dude, and her life's about to happen, and then she has no boundaries. And so she goes to her brother, and he wouldn't have noticed if she was just like another day. And every time I'm like, please make a different decision. And she never makes a different decision. So it drives me nuts.
To me, the key theme that I think of with it is the importance of us taking control of our decisions, right? We all think if we had the superpower of time travel, we can repair relationships, we can create things, and leads to at the end, the only thing that leads to effective relationships is us, right? The humanity is how we treat each other, the connections, and making choices in terms of who we're with. I can see this is another movie that is around joy and really the decisions that we make.
And how sometimes the joy is around the small thing. Bill Nye is the dad, and his son says to him, what have you done? What's the big thing that you've done with your life? Because he says to his son when he tells him, you've got to do something really big, think of something epic. And for him, it was about books. And he's read all Charles Dickens and most of them twice. And then it later turns out that spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched it, pause now, but it later turns out that he knows that he's going to die. And so he retires early and spends as much time as he can with his family. But he's always available for a game of table tennis, always available for a cup of tea, just choosing this one ordinary, extraordinary life. I love that. And the son, so Tim chooses love, and he does everything he can to meet Rachel McAdams, who's delightful, and other things along the way. But the priority for all of them is family. He tries to save his sister, but she actually has to do it for herself. It ticks all my boxes because it's family, love, creativity, nature, small things bringing big joy.
It's also about, mortality, or more of the fact that we have a certain amount of time and then you don't. And so how do you do things? I lost my both parents relatively young. I mean, it's a strange thing. It was really painful, but the one gift was I've never taken time for granted. And so that's one of the things that this movie deals with in terms of thinking about where you are, the importance of connection, the importance of family, friends, loves, and all that. And you basically have this time period to do it. So how do you use your time?
I mean, we all have those fantasies, I think, of spending more time with our loved ones in our head, living or dead, or ones that we've never met before. That fantasy of like meeting the more ancient relatives, or the ones that are currently distant, or parents that have passed away. And the movie magic for me was the awareness that they got to say goodbye, fully cognizant and fully aware. And there's something deeply healing in that. And there is a fantasy in that because it distills the grief process. Bridget, I was wondering if you could dive in a little bit to the Grief Handbook, because you did mention that you watched this when your mom passed away and that you got nourishment from it.
So my mom died very suddenly. She was diagnosed and died 10 days later. And she had been completely healthy beforehand and then had some minor symptoms and then suddenly had 4 types of cancer. We found out about it all. She had a stroke the day after her diagnosis. It was all very sudden and dramatic. And she died at home, surrounded by flowers and fairy lights and her whole family. And it was as beautiful a death, I now know, as beautiful a death as you could wish for. But at the time, we were all just in such shock because like a month before, she had been totally fine. We had plans to go away like 2 weeks later, and then she was gone. And I'm a writer and a reader, and so I looked for something that would explain grief to me. But all the books in the bookstore that I found were either too dense and like philosophical, or they were religious, which wasn't what I was looking for, or there would be like blank journals. And what I wanted was like a little bit of wisdom in language I could understand, and then some space to work through my own stuff. And so I started gathering all these little kernels of wisdom along the way from different things that I read. And like I hadn't realized before how physical grief was. And my brothers and my dad and I all had very physical responses, but very different physical responses. My dad felt fluey all the time. I had like persistent headaches. And then you have these symptoms and you think, someone's just died out of nowhere. Like maybe there's something wrong with me. So then it often comes with like a dose of hypochondria. But I didn't know any of this stuff. So I started gathering wisdom and also like poems and phrases and things that I found helpful. And then at the beginning of COVID, actually, the day that lockdown was announced, I had gone to Durban, my hometown, to help my dad. I checked him into hospital. And we ended up living there for 6 weeks because of lockdown. And I wrote the rough draft of the Grief Handbook, and then it developed and grew a lot over the next year. But essentially, it's a guide. It's called the Grief Handbook, a guide through the worst days of your life. And it's like a kind, empathetic guide through what to do if grief has hit you sideways. And it's gathered all this wisdom that I gathered. And then there's a lot of space. It's a workbook, so there's space for exercises and writing letters to your loved one and remembering things and kind of working through these templates for what to do on the anniversary, that kind of thing. And it's been such a beautiful way of remembering my mom, but also it was so cathartic to write it because it helped make sense of what at the time felt like it would never end. And it was so awful and it was so persistent. And I just couldn't imagine ever feeling like myself again. Now people message me. One of the best things about it, it's published internationally. And one of the best things about it is that we're so connected now. When I published my novel when I was 25, like someone could have found my email address, I guess. And every so often I would get an email. But now like I get messages on Instagram from someone who's just finished my book and they send me a message. And it's so lovely to be able to be further down the path and say, it feels impossible now, but you're going to be fine. And it doesn't matter if you're not fine now, and just take it one day at a time. And whatever you're feeling is completely normal and totally natural. And there's no right and wrong way to grieve. Just you do you, and eventually you will start feeling slightly better. And that's all I wanted, right? I wanted this hand to reach out and just be like, oh my God, this is so hard. Why is this so hard? And what I still find so fascinating, and I think we've become much better at talking about grief since COVID. I think it forced us to because so many people died so quickly. I found it so strange that there was such a social awkwardness around grief. So I would see people and they knew my mom and dad and they were just like, oh, hi, how are you? Hope you're doing okay. And they like didn't want to make eye contact. And then of course I started crying, so I just cried nonstop for weeks and nobody knew what to say, nobody knew what to do. And then I remember distinctly writing on Instagram like 7 months after my mom had died and saying, I'm going through a particularly hard grief patch. And two friends, not very close friends, but two different people reached out and were like, oh my God, is your dad okay? And I was like, no, still grieving my mom, only been 7 months, like not over it yet, because we had this weird expectation that like it gets awkward after 3 months. So after 3 months, just like stick on a happy face and pretend you're okay. And I think it's really important to have conversations that make it very clear that that's not the case. There's no timeline. And maybe you feel fine also. And maybe your relationship was conflicted and you're kind of relieved that they're gone. And that's also fine. Like there are so many different ways to do grief and none of them are right or wrong.
So my dad had a massive heart attack when I was 15. He was 49. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And a few days before that, I had a dream that he had died. And I spoke with him. I said this, and now he had had a heart attack, a more of a minor one a few months earlier. So probably there I'd lost a close uncle to cancer in the same time period. I remember sit down with him and said, well, eventually I'll die, but I'm okay. You don't have to stop worrying. And I had that dream several nights. And the night before it actually happened, it was an unusually beautiful, clear sky in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and we had this long conversation. I was concerned at 15 that all the great inventions had been developed before. I remember saying, well, what's going to be cool for, you have planes, you have cars, you have TV, right? And we had that kind of discussion. I just always thought that was, it was strange what happened. I was appreciative of the conversation. Probably didn't deal with it for a couple of years because
15-year-olds wouldn't.
It threw me in a different place. So I became more distant. But I remember thinking you don't have any guarantees on time, in terms of time or relationships. It probably made me a little bit more assertive in terms of things. We had a retreat when I was at NASA. And I would get feedback from the team. Basically, the feedback I had was always really positive. But the one thing I had is that, can we slow down a little bit? And people thought it was just coming from New York. And I wrote the date on a board, 8/12/74. And they all thought it was a mathematical equation. I said, no, that was the day my dad died. And the reason why I'm saying that, a lot of you talk about, sometimes I'm never satisfied. I'm always going faster. And I said, that can be, an issue with me because I don't take for granted that we have 3 years or 2 years. So in my head, it's to take it in. So it hits a lot, but it's that sense of appreciate where you're at. I always feel that I focus more on appreciating things that I'm doing because, you may not be doing it tomorrow. So.
How remarkable that you had that farewell conversation with him too, because a 15-year-old it could have gone the other way, right? You could have been like, oh, I had this dumb dream about my dad. I'm going to go play with my friends.
No, we had a beautiful conversation, and I always felt that there was a little bit of, some kind of a gift. He was a heavy smoker. He did not expect to live long in terms of life. So to a certain extent, we had those kinds of discussions. Certainly the speed of everything wasn't what I anticipated, but I had that conversation, and I always felt that he was there. And to this day, if I need to talk to him, I know what he would say. So to a certain extent, you have the people that you love always there. And it's a different kind of a relationship and form.
Both of you are getting me thinking death is really not a hot topic at parties where people are preparing themselves for these things. And then suddenly you're hit with grief and the reality of it. And a lot of people are emotionally stunned and unprepared and don't even know how they feel about their own sense of mortality. And then on top of it, both of you lead teams and people. A really good director I worked with said, whatever you bring to rehearsal is rehearsal. So all the baggage that you bring in from the day, regardless of the work you're doing, becomes the work that you're doing. It's really important for leaders, not that you're responsible for everyone's pastoral care, but that you are aware that people are dealing with a huge amount of life. And on top of that, they're also then having to deal with each other in work. And to be able to sit with those feelings yourself as someone who does lead people is huge, really huge. At the fact that you put that date on the board and that you were incredibly transparent with people about why you do what you do. And Bridget, you're always incredibly, I think, very transparent about your story and how you're feeling and engage with people from that place. I think that is a sign of leadership.
And I think the more we can talk about it too, I mean, one of the best books I've ever read is Being Mortal by Tul Gawande. I only read it a year ago. But it's so crazy to me that this isn't a topic. Like, it's the one thing that's definitely going to happen to all of us. We are all going to die. Like, we should really be more comfortable with it. And everyone we know is going to die. Like, it's the one 100% given. And yet it's something that we're like, oh, I don't really want to talk about it. Oh, it makes me feel weird. I find it fascinating.
It's talking about time and time travel. My brain goes right back to a session we had at Washington, D.C. at NASA. And we were introducing the storyteller Jay O'Callahan to a big group of people in suits in a windowless, I remember this, a windowless boardroom. And it was a bit intense because Jay was coming with all of his wonderfulness. And I don't think people were really expecting what we were bringing. And they kept on asking him what his deliverable was going to be. And he's like, my story. And they're like, And I remember he said, look, let me tell you a story. And it completely transformed everyone. And then, Ed, you talked a bit about your dad after that. And other people started opening up and talking about their stories and why they're here, their ideology, but why they're sitting in the chair they're sitting in. You became very conscious of the preciousness of time, that everyone's decided to spend their time in this way together. And it became a lot more deep. So in a way, I feel like the Grief Handbook should be mandatory for all leaders. Like, everybody should be reading this because they really do need to sit with those feelings and be aware that other people are sitting with those feelings.
I think they should read Being Mortal first.
Okay. Being Mortal is a good recommendation.
I read Being Mortal, and I apologize. From talking with Jessica, I knew that you're a person who causes changes and advocacy, and I hadn't thought of anything else. And truthfully, I've been sneaking on Amazon to look at your books, and these are right up my alley. I don't say this just as being nice to you, although that's something I appreciate. But I think it's really important. I read a lot of books on how people treat each other. Resilience. How do we deal with things? I like journals where how do I get control over what's happening? And so, a recent book that I did is The Smart Mission, which is how powerful we as individuals and folks can be if we are clear of what we're shooting for. I had a wonderful editor, Amélie Tabor, and I struggled with the title. And I didn't want it to be a traditional learning and knowledge and all that kind of stuff. And she said, you light up, Ed, whenever you talk about mission. Military people who are doing things when they have a mission, that's the fuel for going to a place, but it's not enough. You can have smart missions, or you can have the opposite of smart. And the smart is about learning. It's about knowledge. It's about story. It's about how we work in teams and relationships, about collaboration. And so the books that I see that you've written there have a lot to do, to me, with the nature of relationships. The Grief Handbook, I don't know if I'm going to get it, but I don't imagine the emphasis is just the grief. It's about how do you move forward and how do you make any situation more effective and even. And I benefited strange ways from the loss of my parents at a young age because I've appreciated relationships much more. The Daily Glimmers sounds like how do you think about and how do you move forward? The notion of having a happy life. I've spoken a lot to people. I think I was probably one of the early people. I started at NASA in the 80s, and I used to, once I got comfortable, tell the project folks that took the classes that, I loved them. And remember the first time I said it was like, it's a strange kind of concept, but I loved working at NASA. If I came back, if reincarnation was true, one of the biggest concerns I had is how do I get back to that place? Because I wasn't a good fit. But it's because of the people. And so when you see these relationships coming together around appreciation, around love, about conversation, about taking charge, because there's always a problem. There are people who I see who think, oh, you're at NASA, everything is perfect. NASA's like any other organization. You have good days, you have really bad days. But if it's in a community of people committed to supporting each other, it transcends. And so, I don't know, I probably shouldn't have, but when I started looking at the books you've done, this is right up the alley. And it also tells me about these movies you've selected. We call the course that I teach at Columbia Navigating the Future of Work. I had to kind of argue with the Columbia bureaucrats because they wanted it to be called the Future of Work. And I said it has no meaning. It's not a course about predicting. It's a course about navigating. Where do you want to go? What's your destination? If you're in a boat, you're never going to go direct. But if you know where you're going, you can adjust.
Bridget, tell us about your third film.
So my third film is The Intouchables, which is a beautiful French film with Omar Sy, who I just love so much. He's probably more famous as Lupin, which was the detective series, French detective series. It was on Netflix all over. He is amazing. And there's an English version of the movie that I have not watched and will not watch. I'm sure it's very good. But the French version is exquisite.
Un petit coup sec, ça me soulagerait. Je vois que c'est la grande forme, ça fait plaisir. Bon, je me suis appliqué. Il faut ouvrir les yeux. Quelle horreur. Oh l'horreur. C'est atroce. Et là, ça vous va bien? Oh non. Non. Mais là, regardez, gilet en cuir, là, sans manches, bracelet à clous, petite casquette de flic village people, un peu. Ah non, j'ai trouvé! José Bové! Vous avez la même tête. C'est très chelou. On dirait un prêtre orthodoxe. Allez.
So the general précis is you meet the two lead actors. There's a paraplegic and he needs an aid, and he is interviewing all these people who are remarkably highly skilled and very obsequious and have all the right certificates. And then Omar Sy comes in and he just needs them to sign the form to say that he came for the interview and he wasn't suitable so that he can keep getting government benefits. And instead, he's hired and he knows nothing. One of the scenes is him pouring boiling water onto the leg of a man and just being like, what? How does he not feel this? So dangerously knows nothing. But what I love about it so much is that at one stage, the quadriplegic man is having an interview with the head of his foundation. And this man says to Philippe, I'm just concerned because but look at him. Who is he? He doesn't have any skills. He doesn't know what he's doing. And does he even have any pity? He doesn't have any pity for you. He doesn't have any feeling. And he says to him, that's what I love about him, is that he doesn't have any pity for you. And there's this amazing scene where they're outside. He's eating candy. And Philippe says, oh, please can I have some of that candy? And he says, no handy, no candy, which I guess is a slang phrase for no, you have to ask nicely and hold out your hand. And then he realizes what he's not saying it to be awful. He realizes what he said. And then he thinks it's so funny. And he's falling over himself laughing. When I was thinking about why I love this movie so much, so it's an extraordinary movie. The acting is amazing. There's heart and also hope, but it's not unfounded hope. There's a lot of reality in it. They both go through these whole journeys. The music is extraordinary. So there's a lot of kind of severe classical music. I grew up playing in a chamber orchestra, so much of it was quite familiar. Then there's a lot of Earth, Wind and Fire because that's what he dances to. And then Ludovic Einaudi, probably butchering how you say his name, but he's an extraordinary composer. And the songs he has written for this are just incredible. And one of them I actually put on the playlist for when we were going to the hospital to have my daughter, because it's such a beautiful, it's called Fly, and it's this extraordinary piece of music. But then when I was thinking about it, why I resonate so much with it, I think it's because of that lack of pity. And I was only diagnosed with diabetes when I was 25. And my husband's brother has type 1 and has had it since he was 11. When I was diagnosed, it wasn't that big a deal. He was a little bit sympathetic, oh, that sucks. But there was no sense of oh my God, you have a chronic condition. What? Oh, our lives are going to change completely. You need to be wrapped in cotton wool. This is so intense. Because he was so used to it. And so I never learned helplessness. And I think that sense of learned helplessness can turn you into a patient. And so I just never became a patient. And my family took their cues from my husband, from Mark, because he knew about diabetes and they didn't. And so they, like they're all nice, but they don't treat me particularly. Especially, they would never assume that diabetes would stop me doing anything, and so diabetes hasn't stopped me doing anything. And I think it's not even tough love; it's just not pitying you because there is something that has gone awry in your system. And I love that about this movie. And the relationship is just, again, it's the connection, but I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated by why people act the way they do. And I thought the interplay of these personalities was just beautiful. And I could watch it on repeat. I watched it again last year, and I wondered if I had pumped it up too much. And then I watched it on a plane, and I just grinned the whole way through. And my French is going to be superb because that's now 2 French movies.
It's going to come very handy on the moon. Someone else will send it. Oh, Maria Tatar might speak French. French fairy tales will get on. Great. Yeah. I've never seen the film, so I watched it for the first time. And I howled with laughter. I was really moved. I think I was moved for a whole host of things. I do have too much self-pity. Like, I wish, Bridget, that it's not a part of my personality I really am very proud of. And it's not helpful. It's really not helpful. That kind of like self-narrative that you write about yourself and then you like wallow in pity. It's terrible. And it doesn't get you anywhere you need to go. When we first became friends, the thing I was also very attracted to was your ability to reframe things and also not have, I guess, the self-pity Jewish neuroses that I inherited, and being like, no, it's cool. Like, that's a narrative you could do, or you could think about it this way. I really, really appreciated it. But also, he has this ability to just talk to people at an incredibly human level. I'm so sometimes reserved, but I love the fact he started asking people about their love life and teased them. But it created these human connections that got everybody on the same page and made them very happy to be there. And I loved that.
And everyone was kind of playing by the rules in the household, and it was all very severe and proper, and things were done a certain way, and then he just shook it all up.
So I had seen it before. What I loved about the movie is I think we take for granted as humans the importance of relationship and companionship. Basically here's a person who could be in an isolated situation, but there's the connection, which I think is the most important thing. Maybe it's the biggest thing, relationships we take for granted. And certainly movies highlight the importance of love and sex and all these other things, but the quiet importance of just being with someone to talk to. One of the things about the movie that irritated me, it had a little bit of the driving Miss Daisy effect, where you have, Jessica Tandy is this well-off person, and she has to learn to appreciate Morgan Freeman. And it may be just me, why do we have to look at people in different backgrounds and then start thinking of how can I appreciate them, as opposed to just go into any relationship saying, hey, maybe good things are going to happen.
Bridget, it made me think about your work with Sweet Life. And I was thinking, you could have your own personal relationship to having diabetes and how you feel about it. And then your family unit being like, I set the tone and this is how the family and you mentioned your partner, your husband. It's another thing to feel like you're engaging with a massive community with people maybe more like me, have some of my issues, maybe all kinds of different issues, and you're having to create material and engage them in a way you feel like speaks to them. How do you do that?
It's actually fascinating. It's a great question because there's such a delicate balance between inspiring and motivating and making people feel bad for feeling bad. and you need both, right? And so one of the things that I find most fascinating and awful that we actively work on is that there's this big divide between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So type 1, for those who don't know, is the autoimmune condition. You didn't do anything. It's a combination of 2 or more immunological insults. Type 2 is genetic, and so type 1 is genetic but not hereditary. Type 2 is hereditary. So it runs in families, often triggered by bad lifestyle choices, right? So eating the wrong food, carrying extra weight, not exercising. But it's not your fault. If you have type 2, you didn't give yourself type 2. But there is often this narrative that if you're overweight and you don't eat very well and you have type 2, well, what do you expect? You gave it to yourself. So we do a lot of work against that. But I heard one woman saying that she was wrongly diagnosed as a type 2 because she was Black and overweight. And she went in, it was an American woman, and she went into the doctor, and he did a cursory examination, told her she was type 2, sent her away with a lot of blame and shame attached to the diagnosis. Came back a couple of months later, very sick, turned out she was type 1. It was a racially and body image-led misdiagnosis. But the narrative, she said, of when she was diagnosed with type 1 was completely different. Because then it was like, there's nothing you can't do. Climb every mountain, ford every stream. You can do it. Don't let diabetes hold you back. And that is wild to me and so wrong. But also I can see how it happened. And so a lot of what we try and do is, so we don't do a lot of discrimination between types. We talk about living with diabetes because a lot of the emotional, it's a fascinating condition because of the emotional side of it. Like, this isn't a condition in which either type 1 or type 2, you can take your medication and forget about it. You have to take your medication, often several times a day. Be careful of what you eat every single time you eat. Exercise as a matter of course. Recognize that your blood sugar, even if you do everything right, even if you're an automaton and you eat the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your blood sugar is going to fluctuate because of hormones and the weather, and if you're coming down with a sickness, and sleep and stress and invisible things that you cannot predict. And so there needs to be this balance between, oh my God, diabetes totally sucks. It is so hard. You're amazing for just doing it because it's so hard. Just try your best, and tomorrow's another day. And don't let it stop you doing anything. Like, you want to climb a mountain. You can do whatever you want. You want to travel overseas on your own. That's no problem. Have healthy children. Scuba dive. Like, you do you. But it is a tricky balance because a lot of the time the narrative is just, I can do whatever I want with diabetes. And that's not true a lot of the time. Like, some days are just awful. But then you also don't want it to be like, oh, diabetes is awful, because there's nowhere to go from that. So we try and do a balance of both, but with a large dose of wherever you're at is where you're at. Mental health is a concern for everyone living with diabetes. Tomorrow's a new day. Like, you can always try again the next day, which is also just true for all of us, right? Like, mental health is a factor for most people. We can always just try again tomorrow. All you can do is your best. You're never going to be perfect. These are universal truths, but they are perhaps more specifically true for diabetes.
Well, and also it's the opposite of the commercials that drive me crazy are these pharmacy drug commercials. Ozempic, take a drug and I can do anything I want and I don't have to be responsible and I'm dancing around and it's like, the better living through drugs is good. But, what's our personal responsibility for some of these things, right? We tend to sell the notion of easy fixes.
For those who aren't totally aware of just the breadth of what Sweet Life does and what the advocacy that you do, so can you talk about some of the achievements that you made that you're proud of?
So the biggest challenge is that diabetes is the number one killer of women in South Africa and the second leading cause of death in men, which is ridiculous because it's not a lethal condition. It shouldn't be killing anyone. It's killing more women than anything else, and number 2 on the men list. And that's because people aren't diagnosed early enough. So half of all South Africans with diabetes aren't diagnosed. And what happens with type 2 is that it can kind of lie dormant for up to 10 years, where you have type 2 and your blood sugar is consistently high. Long-term complications are starting to happen because you don't know that you have it. And so you aren't making the necessary changes or not taking the right medication. And so people are presenting with these very severe long-term complications. So all the things I was warned of are complications. So blindness, amputation, heart disease, kidney failure. But they're only if you have had sustained high blood sugar for a very long time. And so the kind of part that we are trying to work on is the education plus stigma part. So a lot of the time people aren't diagnosed because they think once you're diagnosed with diabetes, you can't eat the food that you like anymore. You're going to be discriminated against. Men think that they're going to be impotent. You're going to go blind. You're going to have amputations stuck just as a matter of course. Like, this is what happens once you're diagnosed. And that's wildly and blatantly not the truth. But we need to change that. So that perception. So Sweet Life is a nonprofit and we work specifically in the diabetes education space. And what we try and do is offer education that is understandable to people. So that means at the right health literacy level, in the right language. We have 11 official languages. So the 2 coolest things I've done with Sweet Life are we did definitely first in South Africa. I want to say maybe first in the world. I've never seen another one, and I'm plugged in internationally in the diabetes space. We did a diabetes stock photo image library, where we got people from our community of different ages, races, genders, body sizes, types of diabetes. And we spent a day with a professional photographer doing all the things that people with diabetes do. So there are images of checking blood glucose, injecting, taking tablets, making healthy food, eating healthy food, staring out the window while drinking a cup of tea, making notes, working, exercising. I think there's about 150 that we've uploaded onto Unsplash, and it's free for anyone around the world to use. And we have something insane, 6 million views in a year and a half, because people are so, they just, this material doesn't exist. And so what we're trying to do with that is change the image that people have of what diabetes looks like. And so now anytime there's an article in the newspaper that accompanies something about, or an article on a website that accompanies a story about diabetes with a pile of sugar and an insulin pen, which is not an exaggeration, that is an image that people like to use, I can email them and say, did you know there's a free stock image library? You can use any of these images. We've had them printed on banners. It's been wonderful. So they are widely used. We still have a lot of work to use, but it's a good step. And then last year in November, the 1st of November, we launched the Sweet Life chatbot, which is a WhatsApp diabetes education chatbot that offers free diabetes education in English and isiZulu on the basics of what is diabetes, what do you need to know if you've just been diagnosed, what should I eat, how do I exercise, what about mental health, what are my diabetes rights? So like all the basics of what you need to know about diabetes in South Africa. And the food section in particular, I'm very proud of, because we have created a printed healthy food guide that's an illustrated version of like, what should your plate look like? What fruit should you choose? What vegetables should you choose? What is a healthy starch? What is healthy protein? And we did it based on food that you can buy from the cheapest supermarkets or the side of the road, because it needs to be accessible. And then we turned all of that into photographs. So now on the app, on WhatsApp, which is used by, so it's 96% of South Africans with internet access use WhatsApp, which is 76% of the whole population. WhatsApp is huge, yeah? And so now you can get, what does a healthy plate look like? Which vegetables can I choose? And you can see in like module form how to cook the various foods. And I think that's super exciting. So we're testing that. At the moment, we're about to embark on a nationwide feedback drive. And then once we know what works, what doesn't work, is the health literacy right? Is it still too complicated? Then we'll iterate for a version 2 in the second half of the year. And then we have our community as well. So we have our website is sweetlife.org.za. It's like a diabetes Wikipedia for South Africa. We're on Facebook. We're South Africans with Diabetes, and on Instagram. And we offer daily advice and tips and opportunities to talk about what life with diabetes is.
I'm so sorry because I've been loving this, and I love your 3 movie choices. They are all yours. We're going to give you them on like a laser disc or like a DVD that can't be affected by the solar. Disc.
Isn't that old technology?
What even is that?
It is
old. That seems very old technology.
You also get a snack. And I know you told us that this was a challenge, so please.
My snack is fruit.
Specifically?
I mean, do I have to get specific?
We could give you a fruit plate so you can get some options.
Fruit plate is fine. Yeah, that'll do. Then I'll have mango, cherries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, peaches, and plums.
I'm just looking by this. This is past the censors. Are we allowed to give that to her?
So mango is in season at the moment. We're in midsummer. Glorious. So if you were going to be super strict, cherries are my favorite. However, if you eat too many cherries, you get a terrible stomachache, because we go cherry picking the first weekend of December every year, and I get a terrible stomachache. So I don't actually want a terrible stomachache when I'm stuck on the moon. So an assortment of fruits seems like it would be a better bet.
You also get the benefit of the seeds. You could start terraforming the moon or the beautiful fruit garden. Mm-hmm.
Ooh. How long am I there for?
Indefinitely.
I'm going to need the companionship from all of my movies.
He will let you have the fruit plate and then a book. You are allowed 1 book.
Oh, man. So it's got to be The Power of One by Bryce Courtenay, which I just read again now. And it is spectacular. And I read it for the first time when I was probably 13, because I remember asking my mom for it for my 14th birthday. And I've read it more times than I can count. And it is just a superb work of fiction. And I read so many other of Bryce Courtenay's books, and none of the others live up to it. This is just outstanding. And it's set in South Africa for those who don't know. Again, there's a movie, but I haven't watched it. Amazing cast in the movie. Daniel Craig plays one of the Occam's wardens, weirdly. And Stephen Dorff plays PK, the main character. But I can't watch it. And Morgan Freeman is like the dude. I know, but I can't watch it because I think it does veer. I can already see it veers a lot from the book. So the book is about this small boy who has a terrible young boarding school experience because his mom has a nervous breakdown, and then moves to the small town in Barberton, which is like the middle of nowhere in South Africa, and befriends a German music professor, and they like take to the hills and gather aloes. I have aloes all over my garden. This is what I was saying about like, I thought I was so unique. And I read a book and I'm like, oh, maybe not that unique. He decides from a chance encounter when he's 5 that he wants to be the welterweight champion of the world. And so it's a boxing book. What's weird about this as a choice for me is that it's historical fiction and sport fiction, neither of which are my vibe at all. I'm like very much into, I don't know, like magical realism, romance. Like Anne Patchett is my favorite author. I think she's extraordinary. But this is just, it's a tome. It's like an epic book, and it's just extraordinary. And it's about him growing up and his relationships at like a very difficult time. And so it's about apartheid, so it's at a very difficult time. It's in the 40s, and how he navigates that system. And it's just beautiful. It's like all the best bits of South Africa in this epic, sweeping tale.
You've sold me.
It's wonderful.
Do you know, for that being your book, especially I'm picturing you on the moon, and I know how important home is to you, and so it's bringing a little bit of home with you.
Go for launch.
Bridget, we're going to have to put you in your capsule.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Roger, go.
So long.
Crew 1 for
Farewell.
Bridget, have a good trip.
Thanks, pressing for strawberry track.
We'll be there soon. Enjoy your movies.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Enjoy the power of one.
I will. Thanks.
We gave you a really big fruit plate. It has everything you want on it.
Enjoy the ride.
3, 2, 1. Let go.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Power and telemetry nominal. Vehicle supersonic. Moonsnacks is sponsored by Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Light Dark Light. It was produced, edited and original music by me, Ben Please, with hosts Jessica Fox and Ed Hoffman, talking to special guest Bridget McNulty.
Highlands and Islands Enterprise is the economic and community development agency for the north and west of Scotland. If you're interested in seeing how we can help you, contact us at hie.co.uk.